All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Housing Network conversation. Historically, we do wonderful formal roundtables, but we have a small yet mighty group with us to just talk about all the amazing things that makes them them regarding singlehood, self-advocacy, celebrating the great things that they are doing within their profession. Before I got to allow them to share who they are, I definitely want to make sure that we put our plug in early on regarding our mentor and our mentee match initiative. So what I'm going to do is read aloud as well as put the information in the chat for you all to sign up for and or share with others who identify as women and are looking to either serve as a mentor or a mentee within ACUHO-I's Women in Housing Network. So this initiative was created for us and by us, and what makes it possible is us engaging with what is essentially an amazing form via Google that we fill out. And we have viewing rights to see who is filling out and how they desire to serve, what are their preferences as far as the areas of information they want to discuss and engage in, passion projects, etc. So you simply go to the link that I'm going to paste, visit the spreadsheet to view who's already present to see if you can already link up with folks based on some similarities, and connect and engage however often you desire to by sharing this information out to others. So what I'm going to do now is make sure that folks can see it in the chat. And it will also make it a point to continue to pub this information on our social media platforms. So for what you all have been ready for, I will also go ahead and just say welcome again. And so happy that you all are here to engage with us. What I for sure want to do is just give a special thanks to Brianna as well as Christy for their willingness to be here with us today. And what we're going to do is first and foremost, give them an opportunity to share who they are. And then we'll just jump right into some guided questions and wherever the conversation takes us today. So Brianna, the floor is yours for you to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here today. My name is Brianna Cresswell, and I am the Assistant Director for Learning, Leadership, and Programming at Wake Forest University. I've been here for 25 months, as my say, and I just celebrated my anniversary here yesterday. So I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Shore. I am one of the Associate Directors of Housing and Residence Life here at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. In my role, I oversee all of housing assignments for the university and occupancy, as well as conflict and mediation. So it's a bit of a fun position. And with that being said, I am going to be hitting 2 years at Lynn come the beginning of August. It's felt like the 2 longest years of my life due to COVID, because it's about a year and a half of it has been COVID. So I'm excited for hopefully a start of a good year.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing it with us. What I also wanted to share with the individuals that are here with us today is that this conversation and time together is being recorded. So if there's anything that you would like to share and or you desire additional anonymity, feel free to utilize the chat, and you can direct those questions either directly to myself, Brianna, and or Christy. But without further ado, we will go ahead and just jump right into a few questions to get to know one another better, as well as just exchange and share experiences about being single and boss in the student affairs university housing. So the first question that I definitely wanted to present to whoever wants to share first is to just tell us a little bit more about your career journey. So it could be how you got here and or what is the moment that you are the proudest of in your current area or position.
Yeah, I can start us off. So my career journey in student affairs has been semi-traditional in the sense that I started as an RA at Northern Kentucky University, loved it, joined Greek life, all of those things on campus, loved student affairs, was a part of it, probably wouldn't have called it student affairs, but had a very invested hall director who my senior year really suggested this future career path for me. When I graduated though, I was like, not for me, no thank you, I would like to make money. So I'm gonna go into occupational therapy. And before I do that, I'm gonna take a gap year. And in that gap year, I actually had applied for a job at Bellarmine University in Louisville, Kentucky as a hall director. And originally it had been a part-time hall director, but through a series of events, it opened up to be a full-time hall director position that they allowed me to take on under the contention that I would receive a master's. And so I thought, okay, I'll do this for 1 year. We'll see if I want to get a master's in it or not. If not, I'm going to continue with my occupational therapy plan. And 6 months in, I knew exactly that I wanted to work with college students, and this is where I wanted to be. And so with that, my supervisor helped me start seeking out some opportunities for grad school and what that would look like. That year we hosted SACSA, which is a smaller subdivision of our CUHO regions and NASPA's region housing professionals. And at that conference, I was the person on the bus that was telling everyone about what's going on in Louisville. And I sat by someone who happened to be an assistant director at the University of Central Arkansas, and he offered me a job and said he would pay for grad school. So that summer, I made my way down to Arkansas, got free grad school, which everyone in this field should do if you can, and helped open their Greek village there. I oversaw the opening of 5 new sorority houses, 5 new fraternity houses, and an NPHC complex. And that was a remarkable time in my student affairs journey. That was very, very formative for me while I was there, finished up grad school. And when I graduated in 2017, moved to Louisiana State University, where I worked as a hall director for 2 years. And at the end of that time, I was ready to move up. So I applied for this job at Wake Forest University, got the assistant director job where I now oversee RA recruitment, RA training, and NRHH and RHA. So kind of through some odd moments and things that just happened at the right period in time, I found my way into student affairs. But I'm really grateful for it. And when I think of moments that I'm proud of or that are my favorite moments in this field, I often think about the small things, students that got into the school they wanted, relationships with students that are meaningful, walking alongside them through those things that are really, really hard and that brings fulfillment to me. But if I had to pick one of the biggest moments, I think, in my career, it would likely be when I was at Arkansas and serving as the residence life coordinator over Greek Village. My supervisor at the time had invited me to come to a conference in Little Rock for what he called a Greek Village presentation. It's a day pass. I would drive down. It was just 30 minutes from our campus, and it included dinner. So he was like, you might as well stay. So I thought nothing of it. All my colleagues were there, met a lot of people. And while I was at that dinner, they started to do some announcements, and they started to read all of these incredible accomplishments that someone had done and statements from students of how people had affected them. And halfway through, I realized that was me. They were talking about me, and I was crying tremendously. But by the end of it, there was a standing ovation, and they presented me with an award. And I think it was just a very humbling time for me to be able to see the small impacts lead to something so significant. That was a very proud moment for me.
Yeah, I can talk about mine a little bit. I guess my first student affairs experience, I went to Florida International University for undergrad, and I didn't get RA. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was not getting the RA position. And I always tell RAs that all the time. And they look at me a little like, what are you talking about? And I didn't get RA. And because of that, I had someone, an assistant director there, tell me, like, you're amazing and like you should get involved in RHA. So that's what I did. I ended up being on the FAR, so the Florida Association of Residence Hall board. I ended up on the SECUR board, so the regional board for RHA. I was asked at one point to go back and be an RA, but at that institution you're not allowed to do both. So I was like, no, I really like this. probably could have ran for director, but made a very strategic decision not to be the director or go for director my senior year when I was trying to go to grad school and have 2 jobs. And I was like, I'm not going to be committed to this. So I made that decision for myself, but realized through my involvement with a lot of advisors at multiple different schools that I really like student affairs. And I wanted to get involved in housing, even if I wasn't an RA. So I ended up at the University of Central Florida. And there, I also had an untraditional role because I was a graduate hall director for a sorority house, which I was not Greek. And I was a little nervous about that. But again, something I'm very grateful for because it gave me more perspective on a department that I wasn't used to being involved in. So I was working within housing, but had to create community amongst 43 women that lived in the same house that and so the kitchen was outside of my apartment in the building. And I just remember it was like at 3 a.m. that kitchen was popping all the time. Like they were like singing and dancing and all this stuff. And I always refer to UCF by being one of the largest institutions in the nation as boot camp, because it literally built me to be the professional I am today. The highs and lows, the stressful moments, the experiences that were very much out of my comfort zone, the people I met 100% led me to be a strong professional, or what I would consider to be a strong professional that I am today. And from UCF, I actually got hired before graduate school ended. I started my last semester of graduate school. I actually started as an assistant director of housing and residence life at Jacksonville University, a small private school in Jacksonville, Florida. And there, I'm a firm believer that everywhere you go, you're going to grow, and you don't realize how much growing you can still do until you actually continue to grow. And I think about the person I was at JU and how much I've come since then. And there I oversaw, development of our RAs. I hosted FRAs. I was the chairperson for the FRAs conference. So I kind of brought back in our RA life with RHA a little bit. I built an RHA there with our very committed students. But at the same time I was there, I really liked the residence life piece, but I realized how much I really love process. Like I get excited about, working with students in RA programming, but I more got excited about like, oh, like let's organize the duty log, like let's organize the programming stuff and like the process that took to build, and how much I really liked housing assignments. And so while I was at Jacksonville University, we talked about free education. I got a second master's degree in business for 2 reasons. One, very clear that education is a business at the end of the day. COVID proved that. But 2, I was like, is higher education forever? Like, I tell RAs now, anytime that someone says I want to go into higher education, the first thing I always say is I want you to think past the hall director experience, and what that's going to look like long term. Because there's days still that I'm sometimes like, am I going to be a vice president one day? Like, I don't know. Is that the direction I'm going in? Like, is housing forever? And so I got a second master's, 1, because higher education is a business, but 2, that business is so transferable that I could use those skill set no matter what I decide to do. And so ultimately, I ended up, when you're 18, you kind of want to run away from home a little bit. But when you're 26, I was ready to move home. And so I came back to South Florida and decided that moving back home was the best thing for me in my experience. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that considering the topic of a single woman in housing. And so I moved back home and I got an awesome job where I got to be in charge of housing assignments while still getting to be in charge of conflict and mediation, working students through those tough conversations, which is basically the two of my favorite things. Typically, they're everyone's least favorite thing, so it's kind of funny how that works out. But I like it because to me, it makes my brain work, and I love that part of it. And so that's what I'm doing now here at Lane University. And when I think of a career moment that I'm most proud of, I don't know if I have one specific one. I just think I'm proud of where I'm at in my life right now as a human being holistically. I think that trials and tribulations as things have happened, we all go through things. And, social media is really hard when everybody only puts out their great moments of life. But I think realistically, we're all battling different moments and they're all landing on us differently and hard in different ways. And so I just think I'm proud that I'm, where I am today in my life and my career, in my personal life, and my having a hobby outside of work. What a concept. Like I'm proud of that. And so we'll talk more, but I think I'm just proud of who I am as a person holistically now, as I've navigated my different schools and experiences.
Thank you both so much. When I tell y'all the takeaways for folks that are tuning in, I see the head nods, I see the comments. That's everything. I will for sure be reviewing this again to write some things down, because even though that is a former identity for me, it's still a lot of things that hit home no matter how you identify. So thank you both for that. What I wanted to do is to present to you all, because right now, whether or not singlehood is a salient identity, most times women in the field that are looking to be developed and sharpened are looking for advice, right? So what advice would you give to women in the field who may struggle with embracing their singleness or making sense of probably pressures that they may be experiencing from family and well-meaning loved ones, about when will they settle down, for lack of better words. So I'm going to drop this question in the chat, and whoever wants to tackle that question, you can take lead, and we'll also open the next question for the audience.
I'm happy to talk. I would say, I was in one of my best friend's weddings a month, 2 months now. Well, time is flying by. My childhood best friend got married at 19 and has 2 children. So I feel the pressures for sure. And so it's hard, right? Because we all have our different wants. And I think recognizing what you want for yourself is important, and being able to advocate for yourself. I think society, unfortunately, has gender roles, and there's certain expectations. But I think just vocalizing, to those who matter, everyone's going to have an opinion. It's natural. It's literally part of life. Like, people, when someone says they don't judge, I'm like, we all judge. Like, we do. It's just part of life. But it's holding each other accountable to those judgments and being able to call yourself on them if you need to. But also, being able to recognize, whose judgments are important to you. My mom and I have some deep conversations sometimes when we're talking about, my future and what that looks like. And my mom is someone that I respect, and that someone I have a good relationship with. So I'm going to give her the time of day to hear, and understand where I'm coming from. But someone that may not matter in that sense, I kind of, not that I don't care, but I don't engage as much. So I put the energy where it needs to be. And so the people that deserve my energy will respect my views and where I'm coming from. And I'm not saying I don't ever want to get married and have kids. It's a dream of mine. But right now it's not that dream, and that's okay. And that, I may not have children, but I got 3 diplomas up on my wall, and I'm going to consider them my children because they cost just as much. And so, and my time goes into them too. And so I just kind of change the perspective, and I give the energy to those who need it, deserve it. And I also think remembering your own values and what you align. Any person that, has a concern about what you're doing with your life, that's great that they concern, but is it valid? Is it adding positivity? I think that's something you have to reflect on yourself. And that says a lot for me, because I'm someone who used to care about everyone and every opinion they have of me. And sometimes I still do. But then I do some reflecting, and I have some really good hard conversations with some of my best friends. And I've also recently listened to some podcasts. And so just like I was listening to this podcast about a group of friends that are all at different stages of their lives, and you can still support one another in your different stages of your life. You just have to navigate, and respect each other's current life situation happening. My best friend has 2 children, Bella and Aubrey. And mind you, I spent all my money on them. They're my godchildren. They're my world. And my best friend respects the fact that right now children aren't for me. And when she has baby fever in a few years, she can, and I decide to have one, she can babysit whenever she wants. But right now I'm, still navigating who I want to be as an individual. I also have a dog, and he controls my life just as much as a child, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that was great. I would say, and definitely hit home on the point that everyone has different goals that align with their values of who they want to be and what they want in their future. And whether you are someone who doesn't want a partner or to go down a life path that ends with children, or you're someone who maybe deeply does, both of those are valid desires, and neither one of those are right or wrong. I echo the sentiments of, as a single woman, I have been in 15 weddings. So I'm like coming up on 27 dresses over here. And that has really been insightful to me about what it feels like as someone who does desire to eventually not be single, whatever that looks like. Means that there are a couple things for me to think about. And I think one thing that I really wanted to think about for myself and that I encourage anyone to think about is to know that if you're struggling with singleness in this field, you still deserve to be where you are. And I think there can sometimes be this perception that, well, you don't have any distractions, so of course you made it up that way, or you're not recognized maybe for a job well done, or you tend to deflect your praise or choose to stay low key, but your abilities and your achievements do not need to be downplayed in the presence of others. And we don't need to put ourselves down in front of others. It's okay to say thank you. It's okay to say I did work hard on that. Your singleness does not define, determine, or become a detriment to any of those things. And with that, I would also say don't let interruptions derail you. So once you know that you deserve to be where you are, you have the confidence to pay attention to the words and phrases that diminish your importance or water down your authority. And I think it's important to finish what you're saying. I absolutely love that our vice president said, I am speaking. And that is important. Once you know and are confident, I deserve to be here, it is important that interruptions don't derail you and that you are able to say, I am speaking. I think the third thing for me is delegate. As someone who is struggling with singleness, I would say that delegation is important. You do not have to do it all yourself. You should not do it all yourself. And that connection is still important to everyone, no matter where you are in your journey. That doesn't have to come through a romantic relationship. Connection and delegation are how you grow leaders under you. They're how you grow yourself as a leader. And it's important that you don't take everything on because you will burn out, one, and two, you won't get everything done the way it needs to be done. And keeping in mind that perfectionism is exhausting. So I would say that as well. Once you are able to delegate, then you won't fall victim to this idea of everything has to be perfect and I have to be the one to make it perfect. It is absolutely exhausting and very, very hard for people in this field to acknowledge that in general, but especially I think for single women, because so much of our identity is in the work that we do. And maybe we find it harder to put our identity in things outside of work because that might feel sometimes less, whether that's true or not. And so being honest about that. And then the last thing I'll say, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more later, is embracing the power of no. And what that means to you, recognizing that not all battles are worth fighting, but no is an important word. And yeah, acknowledging that you are enough. And once you acknowledge that, you're not only kinder and gentler to yourself, but you're kinder and gentler to the people around you. And it can help with any of those debilitating feelings. So love and appreciate yourself first, and the rest will follow. That's my advice.
You two are dynamic, powerful, amazing individuals. I so appreciate all of those gems. And what I'm going to do now is take us a little step back to see if those who are currently with us would like to share anything that they either resonate with or want to add to, and or present a question out there. And if there's a beautiful moment of silence, I have questions for us all. So yeah, anything on you all's mind in this moment, feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and speak into the space.
Hi, you all hear me? Okay, good. I just got a new setup at home and I'm just real nervous that people can't hear me. So I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for this space. I'm a married person and but I spent most of my current career as a single person. And so a lot of what you all are saying, I totally resonate with because that was my identity for so long in the field, right? So I just want to say thank you for everything that you all are sharing. Two, I want to say thank you for allowing me to have my camera off because as you all know, it's like critical time in housing world. And so I'm trying to multitask a little bit with some like brainless work, but I'm loving everything that you all are sharing. But really the question that I wanted to offer, and I'm recognizing that as I ask this question, you all are not the representative of all single women in the profession, right? But what are some ways that you feel like you might need support potentially differently than other women or women who are coupled that we can offer support to you all, whether that's personal support, professional support, a combination of it? How could we help support you either specifically or generally speaking, women who identify as single in the profession?
I think that's an excellent question. I think for me, the first two things that come to mind of supporting single women in the field is one, I think this idea of legacy is truly what everyone is reaching at. This maybe not everyone, but I think the idea of legacy is important to many people. And society tells us that legacy comes through a family, through generations behind you. And that can be incredibly difficult when maybe family isn't on your future or on your radar at all. And so, what is the legacy that I'm leaving? Who will remember me? And so, from a workplace standpoint, I think that that is why so many times for single people, it feels like our identity is ever more ingrained into our position because that is our legacy. And for many people struggle with that, not just single people, but I think it can feel ever more salient for single people because that's a legacy. And so finding ways to appreciate the people that work for you or help them connect to what their legacy on campus is, I think is really important to them finding fulfillment in their work. And with that, I think the second thing is empowering them, as I talked a little bit about earlier, to find their no and to say no, and not making them feel as if there's not a valid excuse to not say no. For instance, if you have colleagues that have families, it is oftentimes encouraged and expected that they will take off for family events or preparing for a child, all of these things. For a single person, that may look very different for me. I just want to hang out with a friend or whatever that self-care is, and really still being able to encourage that to the same level you would with someone with a family, without this additional layer of expectation of, well, you can take this extra duty night because why wouldn't you be able to do that? Or you can be the one to enter the spaces for COVID because you're not worried about anyone you're taking it home to. Those things aren't valid statements to use, but they are used. And so finding ways to empower your single people to say no and respect their boundaries and put those up is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that definitely. I would say that not assuming you're available is super important. However, something I think about too is we have these weird jobs, right? Where typically, if you're switching roles in housing, you're typically not like you're moving. There's a good chance you're moving. Like you're moving cities, whether that's cities, hours, flights, whatever you're moving. And I think that onboarding process is so important for any professional. But I think being intentional with the onboarding process in general for the professionals is important because someone could be moving their entire life and know no one around you. And so I think a lot of institutions do a great job, but even providing resources for like kickball leagues or places so young professional meetups, things like that, so that they can create their own identity in their new city without their institution, I think is really important. I also think institutions thinking about their policies when it comes to living on campus. Example, my institution, for example, does not have a pet policy. I have a pet through my emotional support animal. But I do think a pet policy is intentional to think about because some of these professionals do not have partners and they're moving their entire, world. I also have worked at a school where they let you have a roommate. Doesn't have to be your partner or marriage or this, that, and the other, which is a support system to people. And so I think, I don't know if a lot of institutions think about those things. We call them benefits, but at the end of the day, they're helping the individual professional be the best they can be for the institution and to work. Like you can't be a good employee if you can't be a good person. And so really considering how to create those opportunities for your professionals to engage on, like I said, in the community, things like that when they're transitioning in. Because, I moved to my hometown recently, 20 minutes from my hometown. So I have those resources. But when I moved my first time, I was kind of like, so like, this is a big city. I know no one. I got my coworkers. I can only hang out with them so much because, like, what do I do now? And like in my head, I'm like, do I want to join this kickball league? Well, I don't even know if like I don't even know anything about these areas. Like, and so I just think the onboarding process can be really great to support people as they move, and not just single people, but everyone. I think, it can help, but I don't think people think about like, well, those individuals are kind of alone, like they're moving and they're completely alone. And that's kind of a big deal.
Going off that, I would also say that you can facilitate those relationships across departments. And so one thing we did for our pro staff training this year was we had a new professional new hire mixer, and that was for new professionals and new hires. We reached out to every department, from our campus rec to our conduct office, dean of students, anyone who was a new professional. We invited to go, and we paid for their meal at what we call campus gas, which is a restaurant off campus, so that they could have appetizers, things like that, and meet people that maybe don't directly work in their department, so they don't feel like they have to hang out with just the people there, but they can make those connections, find people that have similar interests as them across campus for that community as well.
Thank you both for sharing that. And I don't know if y'all been catching the words of affirmation in the chat, but it's well received for sure. And I know for a while we've actually been answering a great deal of questions as we move forward. But if y'all wanted, we could spend a little bit more time in that self-advocacy area regarding like, how do you become comfortable with saying no? Even if there have been some examples you're comfortable sharing with us when you've had to help individuals understand that this identity that you hold dear should not be othered and or not paid attention to, if you are one of the only or one of the few that identifies with that identity. So how are you able to become comfortable with saying no when asked to do something?
I would say I'm very lucky at right now in my institution. I report to a woman who reports to another woman. So like, I'm very thankful for that. I have a department and a division because I work at a small school that is very women heavy. But I would change the question a little bit. I try to be proactive. And so in the sense of, I try to advocate for myself ahead of time. Like, for example, when it comes to vacation time, I like to plan everything like way too big in advance. And me and my boss kind of go at it about a little bit about it. She knows this, so she sees it, it's fine. Because I like to plan, like, even before we pick duty. I'm like, no, this is my plan for my vacation. Like, is this good with you? And she's always like, can we please pick duty first? But I say that because how I explain it to her is me being a planner, ultimately is me accommodating my job. I know my high times. I know when I'm going to be busy. For example, I do housing assignments and I'm still expected to be at RA training. I know August, don't talk to me. Like can't even hang out with you at all. Like I know, like come, when the lottery is, I plan it. So yeah, I know, you know what I mean? Like I'm aware of when I am going to be busy. And so how I always gauge it to my supervisor is me doing this shows my care for my job. Shows that I'm doing this in order to make sure that I can do everything I need to get done for my institution in my role. And so I do that. So one, I don't have to say no later in those cases where I'm saying I'm advocating that I deserve this time off, which she fully respects and agrees with. And that I'm going to take vacation time and it's going to be on the times when I know I can. And she fully respects that. I'm grateful for that. And I'm very grateful to be at a department that is okay with turning off your email. I don't do that, but they will let me if I really want to. So I'm luckily in that sense that I try to be proactive for myself before I'm kind of told no in that sense. So just a little, switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think for people that are struggling with saying no, being able to address why it's hard for you to say no is so important. So I think that often falls into three categories. One, we want to avoid conflict. We don't want to say something that could cause tension. Or two, we want to be well liked. We're gunning for a promotion, whatever that is, and we worry that people will think we're rude or that we're not going to be promoted as compared to our peer that maybe says yes a lot. And three, it's become a habit. And so we're just used to saying yes, which being on autopilot is a whole other topic that we could talk about, but constantly saying yes is something that needs to be addressed. And so if you look at those three categories and you think, why is it hard for me to say no to this? Does it fit? Does my reason fit into one of these three categories? I want to avoid conflict. I want to be well liked, or it's become a habit. Then potentially, maybe I should just go ahead and say no, because if it fits into those three categories, then it's not really a reason to say yes. Every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And so we want to make sure that we're saying no to the right things in our careers and what we're doing. And so one thing that I have tried to do as a habit for that is, instead of leaning into no, rather saying, here's what I have on my plate right now. What can I take off to do this for you? If it is an opportunity that I want or think would be beneficial, or I can feel that potentially my supervisor wants me to do. So looking at what I'm able to do versus what I'm being asked to do, and helping to give myself some time to prioritize, to process that. I'm very much a processor, so that I'm making the right decision for me.
On point stuff. I love it. Thank you both so much for sharing what you shared. Look, even though this is I get learning a lot. So I'm grateful that you all are continuing to just keep it 100 in your reality and your truth, because it is, like I said, on point. So I know we spoke a little bit earlier. I believe it was Christy that talked about some of the challenges with like relocating, right? So I wanted to present a question just about what are some things that can be taken into consideration. So far as folks who are looking for tips, what tips would you suggest for single women that have recently relocated and are looking to build new relationships and friendships? So you can even share some things that has worked well for you, but thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is to find something outside of work for you, that you can do. And I know people say that, and that can feel so overwhelming, especially if you're out of grad school or you have forgotten kind of what your hobbies are during COVID. Different things. Life is new. Maybe you're feeling new. So it's hard to adjust back to that, but finding something outside of work is so important. If not, you will find yourself at work. There's not a lot of reason to leave if you don't give yourself one. And so making sure that you put those boundaries in place. I know for me, something that I personally struggled with was rekindling what hobbies I have and what I am interested in outside of just my job, especially moving to a new place. And so, I have a gym that I go to every day, same crowd at the same time. And so that's been a way to connect with people, to meet people in our community. And I'm also really passionate about helping women in our community that have needs for pregnancy. So I volunteer at our pregnancy network downtown. And for me, that's been a great way to meet women and friends and people in town that I've connected with, because as a volunteer, I'm allowed to meet with them outside of that time. So I think, finding something that you're passionate about that you want to dive into. And then lastly, on Instagram, I just followed the city I live in is called Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I followed any Instagram account that had to do with Winston-Salem. Explore Winston-Salem, the best of Winston-Salem, taste Winston-Salem, all of them, because I was like, somebody's got to know what to do here. So I followed those, subscribed to their newsletters. They come to my inbox and go to those events. And it takes a lot of courage to go alone, but those are some really feasible ways that I've met people and relocating.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's going off of that the same thing. I said one thing I had to get okay with, and it's something that has been like a life-changing experience with me, is being okay with being alone and enjoying that time being alone. I think that's something that I had to learn as I got older, was that silence is beautiful it's at times, and that you can go somewhere by yourself and have a good time. Like, I had lunch by myself at a restaurant the other day. It was probably the best lunch I've ever had in my life. Like, oh, my phone's ringing because of housing assignments, but it was undoubtedly the best lunch I've ever had, and it was by myself, and I just like enjoyed being me, and I like to people watch, so it worked out. But going off of that, yeah, definitely getting involved, thinking about what do you like to do. So I didn't like to kickbox before I got here at my current job, and now I go to a kickboxing gym, and it's been life changing. And I get my workout every morning at 6:15 in the morning, and other people that like to get up that earlier there. There's not many people that do, but that's us. That makes us special. So I got really into that. I also like to give back to children. And so I'm a big sister for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Palm Beach County. And I liked it so much that I was appointed to the advisory board for Palm Beach County. And so I'm going there, and we're planning socials. And I'm like, I'm going to get to meet so many people at these social events. And so I think, I just putting yourself out there, and being okay, like with who you are as an individual, and being okay to go out alone. You're going to meet so many people, and go from there. I also would say, like, I have my best friends from college, and they live all over the place now. Um, and we plan intentional trips where we once a year go on a girls trip. And so sometimes it's just nice to not live next to anybody, because one, people want to visit, and two, you can go other places. And so I'm intentional about planning my vacation, like I said, but planning them with the people I love in different areas of the world. Obviously COVID put a little damper on that, but I'm already getting my calendar ready, and excited for what's to come. And so I have something to look forward to in those after August, for example. I'm like, man, what am I going to do? I'm also a big football fan. I follow college and NFL very, very much. So I go, like, people know that Sundays are for football. And I do that, and I do fantasy football leagues and try to get connected to those that are far too, things like that.
Thank you both for sharing that. I took away intentionality. I took away being comfortable with just getting out there. I took away taking advantage of the beauty of social media. Shout out to Instagram, and ways to be connected. But appreciate you all sharing that. And as we are kind of getting near to the end of our time, I also wanted to take another step back, in case there was another burning question, or any points of clarification desired from the folks who are attending with us. So if you have something that you want to share, even from your own personal standpoint, the floor is yours. And if not, I'll just wrap it up with the last question that I believe we will have time for.
I did have a question, but mostly for my own intrigue. I think about how if you want to climb the ladder in higher ed and in most functional areas, you have to be willing to move often for maybe the first 10 to 12 years of your career, depending on what you're doing and what you're interested in. And so I think about, as single women, like, is something you think about, like, finding a potential partner who understands that. Is that something you want in the future to settle down? Like, is anyone really going to understand what you want to go through? And is it easier to just do it alone than have to factor in somebody else if you are really passionate about your career? And like, how do you potentially balance both? I was just wondering if that was something y'all thought about, or like, how do you like reconcile maybe that reality that you have to like navigate? So that's where my head's at.
So I think the partner thing is hard, right? For a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to go like a couple different directions, if that's okay, Olivia. Because I think about finding a partner, and obviously, like, I'm on the dating apps, things like that. I see my 30-year-old students on there, so it's really awkward. But anyways, I say that because before even talking about the travel piece, I have noticed living in South Florida, maybe it's just who I'm talking to, that it's a little difficult to find, specifically for me, men, that have a lot of those same values that I align with, specifically in, like, I'm in the higher ed world. I'm a very inclusive person, things like that. I've struggled a bit with just finding someone that understands, like, why these values are important to me. And I think in higher education, we are very much value-based and pretty much along the same lines with some of the things we consider. And so that is one thing I've struggled with before even getting to the talking to someone about traveling. I think at that point, for me, when I've thought about like what the future holds for me, I know I currently live, and I'm very lucky that I have a job that I'm where I grew up. My mom is not here, but like my brother's down the street, my friends are here, so on and so forth. I've learned how much that means to me, to be this close to home. And so I would consider all moving pieces of, understanding that person's um, perspective when it comes to, their own feelings and their own passions when it comes to like what's going to happen with their career or their family. But I would lay everything out ahead of time. Like I would, if I'm like, hey, we're on the same page here, this is my intentions of being with you, moving forward. Like if marriage is your thing, like I would like to get married. That's the plan. If they're not on that same page, probably should end it right now. Like I hate to say it, but just advocating for yourself. Or like if they're saying, well, I intend to move in a year to across the country, well, you're gonna have to make that decision at that point. I would make a decision at that time. Like either are you willing to do that or are you not? I'm someone that would rather put everything out there. I talk a big game right now, but stay tuned if this actually happens, because if I ever get to that point, we'll see. But I'm just saying I would throw it all out there at the beginning if possible. If later on that changes, I think it's just a conversation you have to work with one-on-one. I know couples that live separately. I did long distance for my last relationship as well until they are able to, both find a place where they can come together. And I think at some point you have to make a decision. Is that worth it? Is it not worth it? I also think, just everyone has to make sacrifices. You shouldn't be the only one sacrificing. There should be a middle ground of some point. Like, if it's all or nothing on you to make some decisions or you stay, well, it's like, we're gonna meet here a little bit. And I also think like trying to, like, for example, like I would work at Lynn, FAU's next door. Like if someone was like, you really want to stay here, well, maybe I would try to look at different jobs in the area. Or if I want to stay within higher ed, maybe housing isn't forever because there's only 2 schools in this area that I could work at that have housing. Maybe I start thinking about like, what else would I do within the field if I need to stay here? Things like that.
Yes, I would agree with all of that. The only addition that honestly I would add is I think just to speak to the idea that compromise is important from both ends. And if you have a strict plan on what you want to do, how you want to get there, it can lead you to feeling trapped if you then enter a relationship somewhere that isn't going to go where you want to go. And so if you decide, okay, like we've talked about these things, but I didn't anticipate this new love life experience for me. So how do we make these decisions in a way that I get to do this and you get to do this without it feeling trapped and creating some resentment and bitterness that then we know in our personal lives seem to be in mayhem that can sometimes affect our professional lives as well. So it's important to make sure that you're finding those ways to, it doesn't feel trapped, I can't do this, but how can I do this? How do you get to do this? Or my dreams have maybe changed, and maybe not holding on as tightly to that identity if you think that there's a potential that it may change or that it could change or that you want it to change, so that if it breaks or turns, life is still good and beautiful and all is still good, without feeling like you have to be in a strict plan.
Yeah, I can say like even my own personal life, like I don't even know what the future holds as me going in my profession. Like I think I could be director? Yeah. Do I want to be a director? That's a lot of work. Like I don't know. Like I question myself, and so I think it goes the same way with relationships. Like when I was younger, I could have swore, like I said, prior to going to higher ed, I swore I was going to be the next vice president of student affairs in my head. And then as you get higher and higher, it's like, do I want that job? Like, I don't know if I want that job. We'll see. Maybe. Not saying no, but right now, I don't know. That's how I feel about a doctorate every time. I'm like, I don't know if I need that either. I will see.
I'm with you on that one. Whew. Y'all, this has been an amazing time. Believe it or not, we are at the end. But first and foremost, I wanted to give another tremendous thank you to Brianna and Christy for willingly sharing the gems, being vulnerable, being real, and giving some very good tangible takeaways. I'm hopeful that for those who did attend, I see the head nods, which is everything to me, that you resonated with it. This was an invaluable time together. And for those who will tune in, make sure you get your notepad and rewind as often as necessary, and be sure to share it with others, because this is something that we all can appreciate. I believe it will allow us to be even better supervisors and supervisees, mentors and mentees. Without further ado, thank you both for your time. For the participants who are rocking with us, special shout out to Olivia and Michelle. Thank you for tuning in and engaging, and continue to make it a great day.